The night the prince lost his voice, the sky shattered into silence with him, as if the stars themselves had stopped breathing. Thunder rolled across the mountains like a warning too late, and deep within the ancient stone palace a young boy stood frozen, his mouth open, his chest burning, yet no sound escaped him. It was not illness, nor injury, nor magic alone that stole his voice. It was grief so sudden and so cruel that it carved a hollow space inside him where words once lived. From that night onward, the kingdom remembered him not by his name, but by what he lacked. He became the silent prince, a figure wrapped in gold and sorrow, seen but never heard, admired yet never understood. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that can change a life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The prince grew surrounded by luxury that felt heavier than chains. Marble halls echoed with footsteps that were never his. Servants bowed to him with fearful respect, and tutors taught him lessons he could never answer aloud. His silence became a spectacle, whispered about in corridors and feared by visiting nobles. Some said the gods had punished the royal bloodline. Others believed he was cursed. No one asked how it felt to be a child trapped inside a body expected to rule, unable to speak his pain, his questions, his dreams. His father, the king, aged rapidly under the weight of guilt and expectation, mistaking silence for strength, mistaking obedience for healing. His mother faded like a dying star, spending hours in prayer, believing love alone could mend what fate had broken. But love without understanding often deepens wounds instead of closing them. As years passed, the silent prince learned to communicate with his eyes. They became deep pools of motion, reflecting loneliness, intelligence, and a yearning so strong it unsettled anyone who dared to look too closely. He learned to write, to gesture, to nod and bow, but words on parchment could never replace the warmth of a spoken sentence. Music, however, lingered in his soul like a memory he could almost touch. He would wander the palace at night, placing his hand on the grand piano, feeling vibrations beneath his fingers, imagining what it would be like to let sound pour out of him the way it did from strings and keys. Beyond the palace walls, far from golden guards, lived a girl no one considered important enough to remember. She was known simply as the one who sang to the stars. Orphaned young and raised by an aging astronomer in a small hilltop observatory, she grew up under open skies rather than chandeliers. Her life was simple, sometimes painfully so, filled with chores, cold nights, and meals that barely satisfied hunger. Yet her heart carried a warmth that never dimmed. When night fell and the world grew quiet, she would step outside, tilt her face upward, and sing softly to the heavens. Her voice was not trained, not polished, but it carried honesty so raw that even the wind seemed to pause and listen. She sang because it made her feel less alone. She sang because the stars felt like silent friends who never judged her questions. She sang because, in her songs, she could imagine a life bigger than the one she had been given. Villagers passing near the hills sometimes heard her voice drifting through the darkness and felt their burdens lighten, even if only for a moment. None of them knew that her songs would one day reach a prince who believed himself forever separated from sound. Fate brought them together on a night painted in silver moonlight. The silent prince had escaped the palace for the first time, slipping past guards driven by a restlessness he could no longer contain. He followed the pull of something unseen, something that felt like hope wearing a familiar face. When he reached the hills, breathless and trembling, he heard her voice. It wrapped around him gently, not demanding anything, not expecting a response. For the first time since his childhood, he felt understood without explanation. Tears streamed down his face as he stood hidden among the shadows, listening to a girl who sang as if the universe itself were listening. From that night on, he returned again and again, always unseen, always silent, always changed. Her songs became his refuge. They softened the edges of his grief, stirred emotions he thought long buried, and reminded him that silence did not have to mean emptiness. Meanwhile, The girl felt a strange presence during her nightly songs, as if someone unseen was carrying her voice across distances she could not measure. She sang with more care, more tenderness, unaware that her music was slowly awakening something fragile and powerful in a heart long closed. Their worlds eventually collided under circumstances neither expected, when the king announced a grand celestial festival to celebrate the kingdom's ancient ties to the stars. The girl's guardian was invited to display his astronomical knowledge. She accompanied him, wide-eyed and overwhelmed by palace grandeur. The silent prince saw her for the first time in daylight, and the sight struck him harder than any song. She was real, imperfect, human, and yet carried a light he had never found in marble halls. She noticed him, too, standing apart from the crowd, regal yet distant, eyes heavy with stories untold. She felt an ache she could not name, though he could not speak. He found ways to be near her. He listened as she spoke passionately about constellations, about how stars were born from darkness, how their light traveled across time just to reach human eyes. She noticed his silence, but did not flinch from it. Instead, she spoke gently, as if words were gifts rather than expectations. She sang for him one evening in the palace gardens, unaware that the sound made his hands shake, his heart race, his breath catch painfully in his chest. Change, however, never comes without resistance. The court grew suspicious. Advisers warned the king that the prince was becoming distracted, vulnerable. They believed silence made him weak and emotion made him dangerous. The girl, they said, was a threat, an unknown influence, a commoner with no place near the throne. Whispers spread like poison, twisting kindness into manipulation. The king, torn between love and fear, ordered the girl sent away, her guardian dismissed, the hills sealed off from royal access. The night she was forced to leave, the sky hid behind thick clouds. She sang one last time, her voice trembling with loss, believing the stars had abandoned her. The silent prince arrived too late, collapsing to his knees where she once stood. Something inside him broke open then, not gently, not quietly. Rage, sorrow, and longing collided within his chest, and for the first time in years a sound escaped him. It was not a word, not a song, but a raw, broken cry that tore through the darkness like lightning. His voice did not return fully that night, but the wall round it cracked. Days turned into weeks of struggle. Speaking felt like pushing air through wounds that refused to heal. His father watched in shock and disbelief as the prince fought not against an external enemy, but against years of buried pain. The kingdom watched too, uncertain whether to hope or fear. The prince practiced tirelessly, writing less, breathing more, forcing sound into existence even when it hurt. He did not do it for power or duty. He did it because there was a girl who sang to stars, and he refused to remain silent in a world that needed voices like hers. Meanwhile, the girl returned to her hilltop, heart heavy but unbroken. She continued to sing, though sadness colored her melodies. She sang not only to the stars now, but to the memory of a silent boy with eyes full of longing. She believed some connections transcended distance, that some souls heard each other even when worlds tried to keep them apart. The celestial festival returned 1 year later, grander than before. This time, the silent prince stood before the gathered crowd, hands trembling, chest rising and falling with effort. The sky was clear, stars blazing brighter than ever. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, uneven, but undeniably alive. He spoke of silence, of pain, of how healing often begins where understanding lives. He spoke of a girl who reminded him that sound is not just noise, but truth given breath. The kingdom listened, stunned into reverent stillness. At the edge of the crowd stood the girl, eyes wide, tears streaming freely as she recognized the voice she had once healed with song. Their eyes met beneath the stars that had witnessed their separate struggles. No words were exchanged then, but none were needed. Some truths are louder than speech. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in hope, and let us know in the comments how it made you feel. Your engagement means more than you know. Just before the ending, We have a special request for you. Comment the word stars below if you believe that even the quietest souls deserve to be heard." The silent prince was silent no more, not because his voice returned perfectly, but because he learned that expression takes many forms. The girl who sang to stars learned that her voice mattered beyond the hills she once called home. Together, without promises or fairy tale certainty, they stood beneath a sky that had carried their pain and their hope across time. And the stars, faithful as ever, continued to listen, shining brighter for two souls who finally believed they were never truly alone.